The dismemberment of William Wallace in 1305 was not only a punishment but a message of power. His execution symbolized the crushing of Scottish defiance. Wallace, born to minor nobility in Renfrewshire, grew up under the English occupation that humiliated Scotland after Edward I's invasion in 1296. His rebellion ignited in 1297 when Sheriff William Heselrig allegedly killed his lover, Marion Bradfoot. In retaliation, Wallace stormed Lanark and executed Heselrig, sparking mass resistance. Thousands of Scots abandoned their homes to join him, arming themselves with improvised weapons. On September 11, 1297, at Stirling Bridge, Wallace and Andrew Moray trapped the English army, slaughtering their cavalry and killing Treasurer Hugh Cressingham, whose skin was said to be turned into a belt. This victory shattered England's aura of invincibility. Edward I personally returned to crush Wallace, defeating him at Falkirk in 1298. Wallace evaded capture for years until betrayed by Sir John Menteith in 1305. Brought to London, he was tried at Westminster Hall where he declared he owed no loyalty to Edward. The court condemned him to be hanged, drawn, quartered, and beheaded, with his remains displayed across Britain as a grim warning. William Wallace was stripped naked and bound to a wooden hurdle, dragged by horses through London streets to Smithfield before a vast crowd. The executioner hanged him until near death, then cut him down conscious for disembowelment. His entrails were burned before his eyes, his castration symbolically destroying his legacy. Only after this torment was he beheaded. His body was quartered, the head boiled and fixed above London Bridge, while his limbs were sent to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth. Each piece served as a grim reminder of Edward I's power, yet many Scots treated them as relics, secretly praying at the sites. Wallace's fate set the precedent for treason punishments in England. The ritual of hanging, drawing, and quartering, first used on Dafydd ap Gruffydd in 1283, became the standard penalty for rebels. Edward personally ensured Wallace's execution was a public spectacle, hoping fear would silence resistance. Instead, his martyrdom inspired future leaders like Robert the Bruce, transforming the independence struggle into a sacred cause. Chronicles reported omens at his death, feeding legend. Within generations, Wallace became immortalized in lore, culminating in Blind Harry's 15th-century poem, The Wallace, where his death symbolized eternal Scottish defiance. Joan of Arc testified that visions of Archangel Michael and saints commanded her to drive the English from France and see the Dauphin crowned. Defying medieval norms, she convinced local commanders through persistence and accurate prophecies, gaining an escort to Charles's court. At Orleans in 1429, Joan transformed a demoralized army. Chroniclers described her arrival as miraculous, soldiers regaining hope. On May 7th, she led the assault on the Turellis fortress, wounded by a crossbow bolt yet returning to battle, inspiring her troops to victory. The liberation of Orleans shifted Europe's balance, and on July 17, 1429, Charles VII was crowned at Reims with Joan beside him in armor. Her capture at Compiègne in 1430 came when gates closed behind her during a skirmish, allowing Burgundian Captain John of Luxembourg to seize her. Sold to the English for 10,000 crowns, she was brought to Rouen for trial. Presided over by Bishop Cauchon, the court indicted her for heresy, witchcraft, and wearing male clothing. Her calm reply to questions, "If I am not in God's grace, may He put me there," exposed the trial's bias. Pressured by English officials, the judges sought a guilty verdict, setting the stage for her fate. Confronted with the pyre, Joan initially signed an abjuration renouncing her visions, admitting error in wearing male clothing, and submitting to church authority. Her death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, yet within days she resumed male dress, either from coercion or defiance. This relapse made her a relapsed heretic, mandating execution under canon law. Joan confessed she had signed only out of fear of the fire, now declaring her voices stronger than ever. Her final defiance restored her authority and sealed her fate. On May 30, 1431, she was led to Rouen's marketplace, dressed in a white shift with her head shaved. Witnesses testified she wept only when seeing the flames, calling upon Jesus until smoke suffocated her voice. The executioner admitted he had never killed someone so holy, fearing for his own soul. To prevent relics, the English scattered her ashes in the Seine, but rumors spread that fragments had been preserved. Her death unsettled English troops, weakening morale and fueling doubts about the trial's legality. In 1455, Charles VII's Rehabilitation Court overturned the verdict, exposing bias and legal violations. Joan's death transformed her from condemned heretic into enduring martyr, symbol, and saint of France. Burning carried theological significance in medieval culture, seen as purifying the soul while destroying the body. Joan's execution reflected this belief, her death intended as both punishment and salvation. Decades earlier, another young figure faced destiny. In 1267, 16-year-old Conradin of Hohenstaufen, last heir of a dynasty stretching from Germany to Sicily, confronted a choice between security in Swabia or reclaiming Sicily at the cost of his life. His grandfather Frederick II had once terrified Europe, but papal opposition ensured Hohenstaufen collapse. Pope Clement IV had granted Sicily to Charles of Anjou in 1266, determined to erase imperial power in Italy. Conradin answered the call of desperate supporters, German knights and Italian Ghibellines. Though welcomed in cities weary of Angevin rule, his triumphs masked strategic weakness. At Tagliacozzo in 1268, his cavalry initially broke Charles's lines, nearly capturing him, but French reserves ambushed the scattered Germans. The battle ended in disaster, Conradin's army annihilated. Despite youthful nobility, he lacked ruthless calculation. Refusing to flee at once, he tried to rally his knights before finally retreating toward the coast with loyal companions, including Frederick of Baden and Henry of Castile, pursued relentlessly by Angevin forces. Conradin's flight through the Apennines ended in betrayal. Giovanni Frangipani, once sworn to his cause, lured him with promises of sanctuary but delivered him to Charles of Anjou for gold and papal favor. Taken to Naples, Conradin faced trial not as a dynastic rival but as a traitor to papal authority. His defense rested on hereditary right, citing descent from Frederick II, but Charles's tribunal redefined his claim as usurpation against God's chosen order. The verdict, predetermined, marked a shift in political authority. Papal-sanctioned monarchy now trumped feudal inheritance. On October 29, 1268, a scaffold rose in Naples's Piazza del Mercato. Before thousands, Conradin, dignified in simple attire, mounted the steps calmly. Witnesses described his composure as regal, moving spectators to tears. In a final chivalric gesture, he cast his glove into the crowd, declaring it a token for his kin. The executioner struck swiftly, silencing Europe's last Hohenstaufen heir. Though buried with some honor, his resting place outside a great cathedral reflected unease over his fate. Conradin's execution shocked Europe, breaking the sanctity of royal blood and legitimizing judicial killing of monarchs. Chroniclers and rulers alike recognized the precedent as dangerous, while Dante immortalized him in the Purgatorio as a symbol of tragic injustice. In Canto 20 of the Divine Comedy, Dante blamed Pope Clement IV for Conradin's death, depicting Charles of Anjou as a mere instrument of papal ambition. By then, Conradin had become less a political threat and more an innocent victim, his fate symbolizing papal corruption rather than divine justice. Later traditions, from Dante to 19th-century Romantic poets, preserved Conradin as a figure of noble defeat and the tragic end of the Hohenstaufen line. His death weakened the Holy Roman Empire, leading to decades of fragmentation, while Charles's harsh rule in Sicily provoked the Sicilian Vespers Revolt of 1282. The papacy's role in his execution eroded its spiritual authority, sowing seeds of later crises. Together, the deaths of Wallace, Joan, and Conradin represent the spectrum of medieval state violence. Wallace's body was scattered as a traitor, Joan's ashes thrown into the Seine as a heretic, and Conradin's blood spilled as a usurper. Yet in every case, brutality backfired. Wallace became Scotland's national hero, Joan a canonized saint, and Conradin a martyr whose memory fueled resentment against papal temporal power. The scaffold, stake, and block meant to enforce obedience instead created legends of defiance, turning death into lasting immortality.